Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I'm Julie Flygare, and I am the president and CEO of Project Sleep. And I'm in Los Angeles and really excited today to talk about narcolepsy at work. Such an important topic, and we're really excited to get to this topic. So let's see. I want to introduce some people that are with me. Hi, Lauren, how are you?
Hi, I'm great. It's great to be here. We're really excited for this broadcast.
Lauren is Project Sleep's program manager extraordinaire. And you are in?
I'm in Charlottesville, Virginia.
Awesome. And then we have Nicole. Hey, Nicole.
Hello.
Where are you joining us from?
I am joining you from Pensacola, Florida.
Ooh, very cool. Well, not cool, hot, probably.
Very hot, yes. Very
And we have Lindsey. Hey, Lindsey.
Hey. And I am actually joining from Belmont, North Carolina.
Okay, so some East Coasters, and we hope to have Trey with us, and hopefully he will be able to join us shortly. And so let's see, I'm going to pull up the slides really quick. Let's see if we can get this going. And Lauren, you want to take it away for some housekeeping?
Yeah, so we're really excited today to talk about navigating the workplace with narcolepsy today. And just before we get started, a couple of little reminders. Please, when you are tuning in, share where you're tuning in from with your state or country. And then if you'd like, you can share your brand of nerdiness. Please like, comment, and share the video to help us expand our reach. Just remember that the video and all the comments are going to be public. So just only post things that you would like everybody to see. Please send in questions that you have in the comments. But just remember, this is for educational purposes and we can't give any medical advice. So if anything comes up that sparks questions for you about your own health situation, we would ask you to take those to your sleep specialist or neurologist. And then after the broadcast, we're going to create a toolkit bringing all of these wonderful insights and perspectives together in a in a PDF for you to download and print. So welcome everybody, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Lauren. Just to quickly, we went over our guest today. We hope to have Trey joining us shortly. He's Rising Voices speaker, an educator and designer. Lindsey, a Rising Voices speaker and employee advocate. And Nicole, a Rising Voices speaker and a senior HR coordinator. So we have quite a great panel today. And just to talk about what we're going to go over, we're going to talk about, like, when you're in the workplace, what accommodations should you be asking for? We're going to start there because we think that's actually some of the burning questions you might have. And so we're excited to hear from our panel about what accommodations they've had. Please put in the Facebook comments what accommodations you've received that have helped you. And then we're going to go through some other things. Does the ADA protect people with narcolepsy? Spoiler alert, yes, it definitely can. And when you should disclose a disability in the workplace, how to work with HR supervisors and colleagues, and finding roles that might maximize your energy. So that's a little bit of how we plan the discussion to go today. And so I'm going to unshare this now so we can just get our panel of speakers here. And I just want to ask Nicole and Lindsey, what kind of accommodations have helped you guys succeed?
Go ahead, Lindsey.
I guess I'll start. For me, it's kind of, depending on the role. I have changed roles a couple times within my company, as well as, the different phases. We know narcolepsy is obviously not always consistent. One of the biggest things for me is I do have flexible time. So I have a frame of time that I can start and end work. And, days that I'm feeling better, I may start earlier than some of those rougher days. I do have additional breaks, and I also have a flexible lunchtime. So if, I have a day where the sleepiness hits me out of nowhere, I am able to log off, go take a nap, and then come back. And, I either make up the time later on that day, other days that week, or, I do utilize FMLA sometimes when, it just is not possible. A lot of the meetings and conversations I have and, any kind of policy change, I actually get in writing. Just having the things in writing helps me to be able to remember them. I have a ton of sticky notes on my desktop that I put those so that I remember, things that have changed. And a lot of it has been just, me communicating directly with my supervisor what I need.
That was a lot right there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what kind of role are you in currently?
So right now I'm in customer retention. So a lot of, kind of sales and customer service blended together.
Cool.
But I am at a desk. And when I am in the office, I do have one that goes up and down that allows me to both sit and stand, which also helps.
Oh, wow. Cool. I've never had one of those. Do you actually use it?
Yeah, I do. And at home, it's just me having to actually get up, but having that change in not just sitting, for hours at a time, really does help me with my wakefulness.
Awesome. All right. Well, that was a lot right there, really quick. And I know we'll talk more about the process of getting those accommodations a little bit later. But Nicole, what kind of accommodations have helped you?
So I have a very similar kind of accommodation set up right now as Lindsay does. If I have a rough start in the morning, which I sometimes do, I do have the option to just notify my supervisor that I'm taking additional time. And just, depending on how long that is, sometimes because I work over in the evening, I don't have to take leave or anything like that. We just kind of work together to make sure that it works for me and for our department. And then, whenever I am up and moving and come in, we just address it at that point. I also have some modified break schedules. So if I'm having a rough day, I can just let them know, hey, I need to shut my door for 15 minutes, take a power nap. Nobody can disturb, that kind of thing. And I also have, during lunchtime, I have a cot in my office, so I can take naps if I need to. We often joke that, with the long hours that I work, that is there so that I can just stay overnight if I needed to, just crash at work. I also, when we have meetings with supervisor or staff in the office, I always have a follow-up with my supervisor where either she or I will prepare notes from that meeting and then send them out to one another just so we can recap and make sure that we were on the same page. There's oftentimes I'm sitting in those meetings and not absorbing everything, and she knows that. So she works with me on that. And she is okay for me to record a lot of our meetings. That way, whenever we're sitting and discussing things, I can go back and listen to it. And the recorder I have, I can actually plug into my computer and it will download the recording and put it in transcribe it for me, which has been very helpful. And that's pretty much just used whenever it's she and I meeting one-on-one. So, but I do work in front of a desk all day. I actually work in human resources. So I am behind the desk most of my day, except for when I'm getting up and, meeting with an employee or a new hire. But essentially I'm in front of that computer most of my day, which does make some days very difficult.
Yeah. Well, it's funny when you talk about having the meeting of the minds after a meeting, by sending the notes. I feel like everyone should do that. Like, wouldn't that be helpful for everyone? I feel like there's always could be a lot lost in translation sometimes, in meetings. So I think that's probably a really good thing to do anyway.
Yeah, and I feel like just writing it down again after we've talked a lot of times helps me remember some of the things we discussed and kind of spur new memories of that conversation. And, so that's been very helpful to do that.
Yeah, that's a great tip for anybody. So I was going to add too, a little bit of my experience. I now run Project Sleep, so I have a pretty great employer, but I did work 2 full-time jobs before starting full-time for Project Sleep. And so I was in an office in Los Angeles. The commute was one of the major challenges for me. And so especially the second job where I was driving about an hour there and about 2 hours home, one of the accommodations I asked for was to be able to work from home 1 day a week, just to minimize that a little bit. And that accommodation wasn't fully secured ever. But the one thing I did secure at one of the jobs was a nap space in particular, because when I first started there, I had my own office and my car was right below the office, like in a parking. I could just get on an elevator if I got tired and go down to my car and take a nap. So I never like formalized my accommodation at first. And then we moved offices and we were in an open space concept office, which I think is great for extroverts, I suppose, but anyone introverted, or needing to something like a nap. And my car was a mile away from the office. So I couldn't just probably walk in a dazed fog and a mile to my car to take a nap. And that's when I actually had to formalize, like I needed a space to nap in that building, and working with HR and my supervisor to create a wellness room that they actually ended up creating 2 wellness rooms for me, but also because other people were using it to rest, and a room with a lock on it and a bench that was kind of like a comfortable bench sort of. And I would bring in a blanket and a pillow in a backpack, and I would put that down so I didn't feel like I was sleeping right on the bench, and nap there, and made sure the door had a lock so I didn't have too many hallucinations about people coming in, although I still did. So that was a really important accommodation process for me at one of my jobs. So we did have a slide to go over some of those different accommodation ideas for people. And I would be interested to hear if there are any other accommodations that people are talking about in the chat as well. But here, an idea could be taking, the ability to take a nap break, providing space for the nap. That was what was really important for me in that last job. Flexible scheduling. I think you heard Lindsey and Nicole talk about that. Working from home. That was something I tried and never fully secured. This was before the pandemic. And I do wonder now if that was, would be much more acceptable now that we kind of realize that people can actually do that successfully. This was interesting. To get these ideas, I pulled a bunch of people with narcolepsy, and some people that worked a lot of shift work talked about actually having more consistent scheduling, like not having to work a late shift one night and then the early morning shift the next day, and having a more consistent scheduling was helpful for them to keep their schedule consistent. Addressing cognitive issues. So at one of my jobs, I had a smart pen that could record the audio of a conversation with the people's permission to do that. And that was really great. It actually wasn't an accommodation for me. It was just because the nature of my job of interviewing doctors and then having to write up about their science. All of us writers had that smart pen, but especially for my brain fog, and sometimes I would get really tired. That was really helpful. And I know, Nicole, you talked about recording some meetings with permission as well. I know Trey, hopefully Trey will be able to join us. He has talked about speech to text technology, which I think sounds really cool. And then reviewing tasks with supervisors. So I just had this little point here at the bottom too from Danielle Brooks, who was a guest on our school accommodation broadcast a few months, well, actually probably last year. But Danielle talked about planning accommodations while thinking about your worst days. And I think that's really a powerful statement for work as well. As we all want to be positively spirited. We want to think we can do the best, but it's probably important to put things in place. Like maybe you don't need a flexible schedule every day, but maybe a few times a month. And so having that in place is important. So do any of these accommodation ideas spark any additional thoughts from Lindsey or Nicole?
And I should have added this. I do have work from home as well. They like us to go in, about 2 days a week. but weeks that I've had, very rough days, I am able to work from home as needed. So I just have to let my boss know that I'll be working from home that day. But I do have the setup at home as well as in the office.
Good. That's nice.
Yeah, and I've actually been discussing with my supervisor as of recently about options of maybe 1 day a week working from home. There's certain tasks that I do certain times of the pay period that I could completely work from home and not, I mean, we did that during the pandemic and it worked. So we've been discussing scheduling a particular day that I could, be at home on that day and know that every other Monday or something, I will be, working from the house.
Nice. Yeah, I think just with limited spoons, it's nice to just be able to be in your slippers and and just be in your own space. I know working from home all the time now, it does have advantages and disadvantages. It can be a little lonely at times, but can be really helpful for balance. Lauren, did you see any other comments from the chat at this point?
So folks, well, first off, we have a lot of awesome people here from all across the US. I feel like there's a lot of great Virginia representation, and also Switzerland and Canada. So so happy to see everyone. But folks have been kind of, echoing that, getting extra 30-minute breaks, using a standing desk, working, just kind of on an individual basis with HR and supervisors about, particular needs. And then also for people who are able to work from home, just echoing how helpful that is.
Awesome. Thank you. We'll keep all the ideas coming in the chat because we will, leverage everyone's thoughts and ideas as we build the toolkit for this topic, which we hope can be really helpful for people that are dealing with this process. So I just wanted to give a quick overview. We will likely go into a lot more depth on this topic in the toolkit. I just want to, if you think about, at least definitely in the US and hopefully in other parts of the world, but I know as far as US law, that many employers are obligated to make reasonable accommodations for a disability under the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, to help employees meet their essential job duties. And so does narcolepsy qualify as, a disability under the ADA? Well, it's important to know that it's always supposed to be really an individualized process. There's not one list of diseases and disorders that qualify or don't qualify. It's always about your experience with the condition. As we know, narcolepsy isn't the same for everybody. For some people, it could be more impactful on your day than other people. So it's supposed to always be somewhat of an individualized determination. However, in general, if you think about narcolepsy, so in order to have a disability under the ADA, it's a physical or mental impairment must substantially limit one or more major life activities. And so actually before 2008, there were some more, I'm hearing some really weird feedback. Are you guys hearing that?
A little bit.
So weird. I'm gonna try to get some headphones or something. Well, sleep was added as a major life activity in 2008, and that really helped a lot of people with different sleep disorders to be able to show that they had a condition that should qualify as a disability under the ADA. So I think I want to go ahead and stop sharing and just ask about the process and ask Nicole and Lindsey, when did you guys disclose and ask for accommodations at work?
So for me, I was working at my current job for about 10 years before I had the official diagnosis of narcolepsy. So, up until that point, I didn't have any accommodation. I didn't know that that was even an option. and I, was trying to get to that diagnosis. So once I actually had the formal diagnosis from my doctor, I met with our individual in our office that handles our ADA accommodations, and got a letter from my doctor that I had to turn in and provide to them different ideas of things that I thought would be useful for me as an accommodation. That was one of the things they asked, is kind of what did I think I needed in order to make my work-life balance better and to accommodate for everything that I was going through. And of course, at that point, I had no idea what to tell them. I mean, I had not been down this road before. I didn't know what accommodations to ask for. And they actually referred me to the Job Accommodation Network. And so I went on that website, and I ended up calling and talking to somebody, and found that on the website, you can put in whatever accommodation or disorder or disability you're looking at, and it will give you back some ideas based upon either your limitations or a work-related function. So I was able to then, come up with the idea of having nap times and a flex schedule, and mornings when I'm traveling to work, if things are not going the way I plan, maybe stepping back and, just if I had to pull over on the side of the road, just let them know I'm running behind or whatever. It was kind of a process, some of the ideas that I had, they were not completely on board with. And so we had to kind of work together and come up with something. Some of my accommodations I have now, such as scheduled naps, is really difficult for me with everything that I do during the day. So I have a hard time actually scheduling that. So I take the route of when I have a sleep attack, of notifying my supervisor and going through the process so that I can take, 15, 20 minutes. And then during lunch, I, put up my sign and let them know that I'm going to be, do not disturb, kind of, I'm out of pocket for a little while. And one thing I think is important to know is that your needs may change over the course of how your narcolepsy changes, because for me, it was one thing 3 years ago and something totally different now. And so working with your employer to go, if you have to adjust that accommodation, go back to them and talk to them. Most things are not, it's a very low cost to no cost, like having a nap space that doesn't really inhibit anything for the employer. They don't have to put a lot out. Using my own office, I can close the door and I've got that space. So it doesn't actually affect them any. So working with them and just knowing that as things change for me, I may have to actually alter some of my accommodations.
I think that's a really good point. Can you hear me okay?
Mhm.
Okay, I've switched to my headphones. I think that's a good point, Nicole. So how has your accommodations or your experience changed over the years, do you think?
Well, now that I feel like I'm on a more consistent medicine regimen, I don't have as many sleep attacks. My issues are more whenever I hit my insomnia cycles, and I'm not sleeping, and I've had an exhaustive day, and then I'm up all night. The next day, sometimes I'm just a little later coming in. And so just knowing that I can make that phone call or send an email and say, I need to go back to bed, and I'll update you whenever I get up. I don't utilize that too often, just because I put a lot on myself, and I tend to feel like I'm disappointing the team in the office if I'm not at work. So I try to push through it, but I'm learning that I need to have self-care and advocate for myself. And when I'm having those times, don't feel the pressure of the job. I have to take care of me first. And so, now it's not as bad, but I have those periods of times where I may need a day I need to work from home. I'm not functioning enough to get in a car and be safe driving to work. So, some of that has changed over the past few years.
Thank you, Nicole. Well, Lindsey, we want to get to you, but we also want to say hi to Trey. Hey, Trey.
Hello, what's going on, y'all?
We're so glad you're here.
Yes.
So
Good.
catch us up a little bit with your process, what kind of a role that you're in, and what kind of accommodations you've had at work, and when you disclosed about having narcolepsy.
Awesome. I think I'm gonna probably work a little bit backwards. Usually when I get hired, I disclose about my narcolepsy. Never before, never during an interview. Like as soon as I get hired, I'm having that conversation with either my supervisors or whoever hired me, like, yo, this is what I got going on, narcolepsy this, type this, and explaining it to them the best way that I can and kind of bringing up what I need. So currently I work as a paraprofessional, right? I'm a special ed associate in an elementary school and also work at a Boys and Girls Club. And previous jobs that I've had required different things from me from an energy standpoint. I had a job working as a dietary aide in a nursing home. I had a job where I was also a camp counselor at a respite camp working with special needs individuals as well. And those different jobs required different accommodations for me. The job that I have currently, kind of like what Nicole was saying, as far as my treatment wise is at a pretty good level right now. So I don't have as many as like I shouldn't say loud accommodations, like just on point accommodations. But my previous jobs that I've had at the dietary aid facility, after I disclosed I had narcolepsy, one of the accommodations that I asked for is, naps, frequent naps. And it was kind of cool to work there specifically because it was at a nursing home and they allowed me to kind of sleep in the empty rooms on the beds when I had my breaks and whatnot. So I got like an additional break in order to nap. The respite camp job required of me was a job that I needed to be there from Friday to Sunday. So I had to stay overnight, and that interfered with the nighttime medication that I take. When I first got the job, I kind of just shrugged it off a little bit, like, oh, I don't need to take my nighttime medication. And I quickly found out that that wasn't the case, because if I stayed up that Friday night trying to take care of my residents, and I woke up the next morning without my nighttime medication, I wasn't able to kind of be like fully functioning for them like I needed to. And that's the type of work it is. I'm having to be alert literally 24/7 for them. So as I went back after the pandemic, because it kind of closed down a little bit, they closed down a little bit and they're like, okay, here are our new procedures. We're wearing masks, we're wearing shields. And I had to set my new supervisor aside and was like, hey, I know that I worked here before and I did the nights before, but there was always this conflict as far as my medication is concerned, kind of advocating for myself, right? And I'm like, I won't be able to do the night shift portion of this job. However, once I brought that up, it resulted in like a significant pay decrease because I got paid that whole time from Friday through Sunday, and including the nights, because what happened specifically was I need to get up in the middle of the night at 1 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 5 o'clock to check on the residents, make sure they're still breathing. If they had any, if they need to use the restroom, check on them as well, just making sure they're good. And now that I can't do that portion, the accommodation that I had was I slept in a different room, which is awesome. It was a campsite, so they had different rooms for me. However, like I said, it resulted in that pay decrease as far as being able to sustain myself off of that job. So from that standpoint, in the nighttime medication, I always felt great working up the next morning and taking care of them and did the best that I could do. But that was kind of like a downfall, if that makes sense, with advocating for myself.
Thank you, Trey. We're so glad you're here.
Yeah.
Yes. No, that's all right. That's really, really helpful. I think it's important to talk about, finding even the right position given, different aspects of living with narcolepsy.
Mm-hmm.
So Lindsey, do you want to share a little bit about when you decided to disclose? Did you disclose right away or wait?
Yeah, so kind of different for me. I actually, during my diagnosis and shortly after, I was really struggling, and I was actually in an outside sales position. So I had decided to leave. I did take some time off to try to get some of my medications more in line. So going in, this was the first job I had that I had actually disclosed.
Hey,
I waited until
Lindsay, there's a very strange noise happening again on yours now. I don't know why.
look
Do you
at my
want-
headset then.
Okay.
Is that better?
Oh. Try again.
Does that sound any better?
Nope. Sorry about that. We'll give you a few minutes, maybe. You want to try to change it over to that or something? I don't know.
Yeah, let me try something.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and mute you for now. We like your regular voice a lot. We don't like that one.
Does that sound any better?
Yes, 1000%.
Okay, sorry about that. So I left my outside sales.
Can you start over? Just start over that whole thing. Okay.
So prior to being diagnosed with narcolepsy, I was working in outside sales. I made the decision that I was not able to continue with that position. So I left, worked on medication, kind of got myself, to the point that I felt like I could give to a job. So going in, this company that I work for now was the first company I'd ever worked for while being diagnosed. So I waited until I had a job offer and had accepted prior to disclosing. And going in, I had some accommodations in mind, but I didn't know a ton of what to even ask for. I knew what my struggles were, but I didn't know how to fix them. And someone actually pointed me in the direction of Job Accommodation Network as well. But one thing I had to learn was that, they kind of morphed over time. What I needed when I first started is very different than what I need now, both with my position as well as, how I'm doing. My medications when I started was very different than what I have now, and I am able to be a lot more functioning. So, I have built relationships both with my supervisors as well as some of the ones in HR, as I discover things aren't working as well as they were previously. We go back to the drawing board, we brainstorm ideas, we change things around so that I can work the best I can and be as productive as I can with my workday.
Along those lines, you talked about working on something that's a little bit less formal of an accommodation, but someone pinging you. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so, obviously I have my accommodations through HR, but some of them, rather than going through HR, I would work with my supervisor directly. And one of the things that a supervisor actually recommended to me was having someone, especially when we were in the office, if I am kind of getting in that dazing out stage, just pinging me. Early on, I was very, I wasn't very open with disclosing to my coworkers. So I had a specific coworker that would ping me if she saw me just kind of dazing out. And
what does pinging mean? Can you explain that a little bit in case someone doesn't?
Yeah, so we have an internal messaging system, and she would send me a message, and when that message gets sent, there's a little ding, just like with email, and that would help me wake up. And that was kind of my reminder, like, hey, either take time and go take your nap, or sometimes just hearing that sound would kind of help bring me back. So it helped me be more aware of when I was having those moments.
For other people, Nicole or Trey, have you had any sort of informal support from colleagues or supervisors like that?
Yes. So when I worked at the dietary aid facility, I kind of realized I also have like a dual diagnosis of ADHD as well. So there's this weird thing of when I'm experiencing my symptoms, specifically like the excessive daytime sleepiness, sometimes all I need is like maybe some extra stimuli, right? Like if the room is kind of low, maybe low light, there's not a lot happening there. Maybe all I'm required to do is wash dishes, right? And there's just nothing happening. I think that's more susceptible for my symptoms to come on, right? So I think I tried to speak to my HR at the time, and I found it so weird to tell her like, hey, I just need somebody to talk to me, right? I just need somebody to be there, right? And to engage in a conversation with me, or kind of be more lively, or ask me to do something different. These things that like you can't really put on paper, I guess. Like how do you ask somebody to be like a friend to you at that moment in time? It's like I understand you got a job as well. You got some residents you take care of, but please talk to me. Like this is I'm kind of struggling here. Like talk to me. Tell me anything. Tell me anything. Random. I need it. There's just also a phenomenon called like body doubling, which I think it's an attention deficit term as well. It's just like being able to focus on the thing you need to do with somebody else in the room, right? So I think that one thing, just having somebody else there is extremely, extremely helpful.
Yeah,
I love that.
I had the same kind of thing. There was an individual I had working with me that recently retired. And sometimes I would just get up and go in her office and be like, just talk to me. Just be here. Just, I need to chat 5 minutes, whatever. Let's lock the building, so walk outside, get some fresh air, come back in and be like, okay, I got this. Let's get back to work. And
Yes.
it was nice having that support of somebody who was, a coworker and a friend who understood and saw me every day and knew that I wasn't just tired because I'd been out late the night before or something. I was, it was legitimate. And it was just nice knowing you could go to somebody who got it, and didn't ridicule or say, well, just go get it, go home tonight and get some rest. And, because none of us want to hear that when we're experiencing what we experience. So it's just nice to know somebody was understanding and helped me.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I think, hold on, Julie. I think when it comes to that accommodation conversation, that specifically, I think is really hard to ask for because it doesn't feel so, just like Julie said, it's informal.
Mm-hmm.
It's very informal, but it's also like needed. It's needed. I please come talk to me. Like, let's go take that lap. And I think I like this conversation, being able to see what happens next as far as like what we can ask for in a professional way to say like we need that support, because being told to like stand up or like deal with it by ourselves, like, oh, you're sleepy, can't you just stand up? Like, can't you just get a drink of water? And it's like, it's not that simple, man. Like sometimes I stand up and I'm still going through my thing, right? So I like this facet of the conversation a lot because it feels more based around empathy, right? If we think about anybody else who has some type of, disability or like something that is like preventing them from doing what they need to do, right? Some type of boundary of some sort. A lot of it, especially when I work with special needs individuals, it really is like empathy first. Like I get when my students are going through something or having a moment, instead of just being like, yo, knock it off, I need to understand what's wrong with them and accommodate them accordingly. That eye contact, that softness, and a lot of times in the workplace, depending on your job, that softness, that empathy is not always guaranteed because of the focus on the work part, that you're here to do a job. And yeah, so I just wanted
It needs to be more natural.
Yeah.
Not so textbook in writing, this is your accommodation, it's XYZ, like some leeway to understand that we're people and we don't know from moment to moment exactly how we're going to feel and what we're going to need. And we can't always document every aspect of it and know that, okay, does this fit into the accommodation? Can I do this? Am I okay to go this direction? You know, it just being there in that moment and turning to somebody and being like, this is what I'm experiencing right now. Can you help me?
And I know for me, our process involves, forms that I have to go to my doctor, sit down with. So some of these accommodations, that process does take time. And sometimes I don't have that time to wait to get these. So working one-on-one with those supervisors has allowed me that flexibility to even see if this accommodation would work prior to going through all that as well. And some of these, I don't want to go through this whole process if it's something that is not going to work for me. So that, I think learning the difference between those formal accommodations as well as, kind of these one-offs, just working with that supervisor directly, I didn't realize, you could have both. And that was a really big learning moment, I think, for me.
I think that really highlights why this discussion is so important, because every job is different, and it is kind of even sounds like a multi-layered process of finding ways to work, and every person with narcolepsy is different. So when you guys were talking about the stimulation, I can both really understand that, but then there's also a tired I have, which is so tired that I'm also on the verge of having cataplexy. And so when I would be walking to my car and I'm in that zone, all I would think is, please, no one talk to me. No one talk to me, because especially a friend, if I saw a friend on the way to the car, I felt like I was going to collapse. And so, but I also know that tired where it's just like, could actually be turned around by talking to someone. But then there's also a tired where I'd be like, oh gosh, I hope I don't see anyone I like, because I just need to go nap, and I need to nap now before it turns into cataplexy. So it's just really, really interesting from person to person. So as much as we'd love to say there's one framework for just the, getting the job and the accommodations and it's all going to work out, like so much of it is more individual. And I know, Lindsey, you just talked about this being a process. I think we should highlight that a little bit more. Possibly, and like how that can, basically setting an expectation that it is going to be a process. And we have Nicole here who works in HR. So I don't know if you want to give kind of a perspective on why is it a process? Not that you represent all of HR professionals around the world, but why is it a process, and what goes into it on an HR perspective?
Right. So, in my role in HR, I'm not our ADA coordinator. So, I have understanding of it, but I will say that it does differ across every employer. So what is the process at one place is not necessarily the exact same process elsewhere. However, it is the same basic thing of, you have to meet with your doctor and have some kind of documentation. And the important part of it is the employer needs to have that so that they understand what's going on, and they don't think, this person's falling asleep at their desk, or, and of course, we're talking about narcolepsy and sleep disorders, but if you're falling asleep at your desk, are they wondering, are they doing drugs? Are they, drinking during the day? What's going on with this person? So having that accommodation, it's an open communication with your employer and you so that they have an understanding of what you're dealing with, what you're going through, what you need. And that's why that process is in place. But it also, from a personal side, not HR, it's somewhat of a protection for me. It doesn't mean that I can slack off at work or not do my job and then say, but I've got an accommodation, I can do this. I still have to meet the needs of my employer and do my job and do it effectively, or I'm not going to have that job. Just because I have the accommodation doesn't mean that I can do whatever I want to do. And, and I've actually met some resistance with people at times where they say, well, you've got this accommodation, so, you can go do that. And I can't. And I'm like, well, it's not really how that works. And I would trade narcolepsy for anything if I don't want this accommodation. I don't want to be going through all this. So, but it is important that you do have that on file with your HR office. And, you know, if it's to an extreme that you need something. Now, before I got to the point where my narcolepsy had progressed so drastically, I didn't have anything on file. I didn't, you know, nobody really knew what I was dealing with. But when it got to that point, that's when I made that decision. I have to actually talk to somebody because I need to know that we've got documentation of this, just so that I did not run into any problems.
Yeah, I was going to add at my job where we worked on getting a wellness room so I could take a nap. It was such a long process to find the space. And it was really frustrating to me because I needed to nap every day. You know, it wasn't like, oh, in 3 weeks I need to nap. It's like I need to nap every day. And there just seemed it was frustrating. And actually it took my supervisor became my best advocate. And she ended up having to escalate it to her boss and then her boss's boss. And I'll never forget that man came over to me and said, I didn't know him. He was really high up at the organization. And he just walked over to my desk one day and he said, I hear you're not getting what you need. We're going to take care of that. And I was like, okay, thank you. And by getting some urgency on our end of like my supervisors, we were able to increase the speed in which HR dealt with it. It, you know, and it just felt unfair to me because I started to realize, like, what if you like just didn't have a refrigerator for someone's like medication that's like life altering? Like, you just can't just not do it for 3 weeks while you build a fridge, you know, or pick out a fridge at Home Depot. Like, that's not how it works. And they just weren't taking it seriously, it felt like, and the urgency behind it. And then once we did get the room, there was all sorts of issues with like whether the room was locked or not. And then there was a lot of other people using the room because, go figure, in a building of 600 people, more than just one person was tired and wanted a quiet space. So they end up having to create 2 rooms. You know, and then one day, like, the bench went missing in the room. And then I'll never forget, we finally had a better HR person who had some urgency behind this. And my boss, in their high heels, they found the bench in the wrong room. It had been moved for some reason. And the 2 of them in their high heels, like, you know, carried that bench back to the room it needed to be in for me. And it just was like, oh my God, you know, like, what a sign of support. So I think also just like the real human nature behind some of this, like finding a supervisor like I had no way of knowing when I applied for that job whether or not she was really going to be so understanding as she ended up being, and like that she would end up moving that bench herself. You know, I just lucked out in a way on that. But I don't know, Trey or Lindsey, did you guys have any other things about like it being sort of a process?
Yeah, you know, like I said, this was the first job I had even applied for accommodations. So, you know, I got the note from my doctor, but then my company requires a specific form with specific questions. So then, you know, sending that to my doctor and them actually understanding what we spoke about and what's on that form. So for me, I found out it was easiest to do that at appointments. So the appointments, you know, when I need to do that, we actually book a longer appointment so we can go through that together. Because some of those first attempts at that, there was this back and forth. But, you know, us sitting down together, doing that, and then have, you know, obviously waiting on HR to come back with what they can do. You know, it did take longer than what I was expecting going in.
Yeah.
So
Sorry, I'll say, even me being in HR, I had that same experience. It was like, and I'm right there down the hall from the person, but yet I had to wait my turn, so to speak, which is frustrating when you need the accommodation at that point.
yeah, it's a process because it's not like your narcolepsy is on hold, right? It's not like you can just say, you know what, for the next 2 weeks, I don't got it. So like, you don't got to work that fast. I'm very glad, Julie, your situation, I'm glad they were able to like escalate that for you. That's amazing. Because in the supervisors moving the bench back, that's awesome. That's great. when it came to my process, just like Lindsey, just like Nicole, it's once again, it just took a while. I think if anybody could take anything away from this, is that it's not going to happen the next day. It's not going to happen the next day. Having just being able to talk, and I didn't know the language, right? I think I didn't know what to say. They're like, okay, what kind of accommodation do you think you need? I said, I don't know. Like I looked at my HR and said, I don't know. And then on that point that Nicole was saying, then my HR looked at me like is it serious enough? Like, what don't you know? Like, why don't you know what your accommodations would be if you had this sleep disorder? Like, is it real? So, and then having her like give me that face, I was like, ouch, like that kind of hurt. So going back to my doctor and then having that conversation as well, kind of like Lindsey, just those are like my doctor was the one that'd be like, so what do you think? Da, 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 da. And even at that moment in time, it begged the question, was my treatment like that effective, right? Like I would it brought to light something new. I learned that I actually had way more sleep attacks than I thought I did. Like when I told him, oh no, I definitely need more. And he was like, what? Like he was questioning. He was like, what do you mean you need more? I was like, oh, I guess I didn't mention this the last 3 appointments because I didn't consider it's often I forget, like it happens on a regular basis. It's so normalized to me that what my symptoms are and like when I need to bring them up. Like I used to only think I had cataplexy in my face. Like I only thought like I would, have a cataplectic episode and it would happen in my face. And then upon just talking to more people, I realized I happen to my knees too. Like my knees will buckle and so my elbows and my hands. And I thought all that was just normal up until learning more about my symptoms and what to research basically. I also want to say one of the hardest parts I feel like being somebody I think just, we're all from different places, but the whole having to have a job and depending on where you are in your life and maybe like whether, socioeconomic status, like where you are and your family dynamic, like whether you have kids or not, advocating for yourself is great. However, sometimes it's really hard to, and it can sometimes be discouraging to look at your employers and be like, I need this. And there's like, but you like say you need that job, right? It's like, sometimes you find yourself kind of being a little, I shouldn't say a weasel, right? But kind of sneaky for me, right? Before I applied for accommodations for the dietary aid job, I slept on the floor. I slept on the floor in the bathroom. Like I actually turned the light off and passed out. To this day, at the school that I work at currently, on my social medias, I have a video of me documenting what my lunch break was like, and I didn't eat lunch. I barely I ate maybe 2 carrots, and I found this room in the back of the school that had like a tub in it, right? And I ended up moving all the stuff out of that tub, sleeping in that tub. And some of the comments that I had on my TikTok page about that video was like, oh, should the room be locked? Kind of like Julie, like, why is the room locked? Is that dangerous? And a lot of people were like shocked. And a lot of people in the comments were like, oh my gosh, same. I've definitely slept in these places. And I think it's a privilege to even like get an employer to be like, let's put a bench, right? Or in your office, like, let's put something here, because not every job is like that. I'm fortunate to be working at a school, and the other jobs, they had beds. But what about maybe people who are shift workers, right? Or who work fast food or work any other job to where that accommodation might not be, that they might not be able to do it. Like, I think having empathy and just raising awareness for that too. And hopefully like employers can see this and be like, yo, that is a real thing. And having that conversation with yourself as somebody who is an employee, but also like a person first, and what could work for you.
I think that's a really important point. The different places. I have a really close friend with idiopathic hypersomnia who's a teacher, and so she'll write me, oh, I found a new space at the school, like, like, and these really weird space finds to be able to put her head somewhere, that it's outside the classroom. And there are a lot of situations that aren't really super conducive to a full like private room with a bench. As Nicole did point out though, it also, and my dad pointed this out, my dad was an employment lawyer, and he said the kind of accommodations people are asking for with narcolepsy are not usually all that expensive. If you can find some sort of a room that maybe isn't used all the time, even a closet, you know, something where you can put a yoga mat down, or an empty office. These aren't asking people to usually build like a whole new building or, you know, something that's so unreasonable, working with the space. But of course, like you said, Trey, that's not always the case either. I know probably a lot of people use their cars. Like the second job I had, the space they found for me did not have a lock, and someone did walk in on me, and I hated that. And so I just chose to use my car, even in LA heat. You know, I just found that the best thing I could do. So yeah, we had some questions here from the audience about any advice for talking with coworkers versus HR and supervisors. So, you know, how do you bring up narcolepsy? How do you talk about it? You know, do you give a full presentation? Do you try to mention like some of the more invisible symptoms, or do you go for short versus long conversations? What do you think?
For me, I think
So,
being honest. Oh, sorry, Lindsay.
no, you go ahead.
I was just gonna say, being honest and open, you know, explaining to them that that narcolepsy is not tired because you didn't do what you needed to do with proper sleep hygiene or going to bed at a certain time, that it's unpredictable and it's not something that we can control. You know, this is a neurological disorder. This is, you know, outside of our control. And the people that I've talked to that have listened and heard what I have to say, they have a much better understanding afterwards when I tell them, you know, it's like I'm sitting there and then all of a sudden my body just feels heavy, and I can't function and I can't move. And, you know, and if they've witnessed this with me, then they get it. Or if they walk in my office to talk to me and I'm having a hard time just getting the words that I want to them, you know, then they're like, are you okay? And sometimes that opens the conversation up, and it's a good opportunity then to share that.
So for me, it was probably, I'd say, a good year and a half that I was with the company before I even told more than one or two coworkers. I usually do keep it pretty brief, but try to explain how it affects me. But I do leave it open for questions, and a lot of them have had questions about it, you know, and being able to have that back and forth conversation to where they understand what I'm going through. You know, I work on a pretty small team, and you know, our whole team knows it now, but those are, you know, most of them had never even heard of narcolepsy or had seen the very inaccurate depiction of it, but actually explaining, here's what it is, but here's how it affects me, was able to, I think, make a bigger impact.
Lindsay, did you also do something else at your workplace to, you know, along these lines?
I did. So after I disclosed, we started forming some different employee resource groups. And it was a time that I was really struggling at work, trying to figure out what accommodations. And I pretty much went to my boss and asked, well, if there's all these other employee resource groups, why is there not one for disability? And it was kind of this eye-opening moment for them because it had been left off. So I ended up creating an employee resource group for individuals at our company that have chronic illness and disabilities. And it was a really cool experience. Once we got it up and going, there were so many people that would say things, you know, I didn't know this existed, you know, how much just having people that understood what it's like going through this process of, you know, working and applying for accommodations, just how helpful it was to have that safe space.
That is so cool. We're all cheering loudly for that. And Trey, did you want to add something on the topic?
Yes. Hopefully this doesn't cut out. Can you guys hear me? Awesome. So for me, it's kind of, I disclose it after I get hired. And when I am introduced to a new staff member, because I do work at a school, it's kind of like a slow, gradual process. I'm really formal about it. I say, hey, I'm going to disclose something to you. Like I pull them aside. I say, I am with this. And I try to, every day show up and be the best I can. And as they see my symptoms, describe them, right? What also helps in my position is the best principal ever. Like she allowed me to last year speak on the intercom at my elementary school that I work at and kind of say, hey, my name is Mr. Trey. I have a sleep disorder called narcolepsy. Kind of breaking it down into layman's terms because there's only like kindergarten, fifth graders there. But if you ever see me, falling asleep, if you ever see me tired, this is the reason why. And I'm constantly out just speaking. I'm really vocal about it. I'll sometimes look at the kids if we have like downtime and say I'm watching that classroom, I'll do like, all right, guys, what's my sleep disorder called? And they're like, narcolepsy. I'm like, what type do I have? And they're like, type what? I'm like, what is type what? Like, like with cataplexy. And they're able to say these words. And it just makes my heart so happy because this is a room full of kids. This is like 30-something kids in each room that are just knowing about it. And just because I'm existing, just because I'm showing up and being awesome. Now, when they ask me like what's going on, I could tell them, and then other students can be like, "Oh yeah," and they can even answer that question as well.
That is awesome. I just we had one more question about asking for accommodations while working from home. And I think that's really important too, because even when you are working from home, which is wonderful, you can still have cognitive impacts of a condition like narcolepsy. And I guess from my perspective, I would just always be trying to think, like we've talked about, being like solution oriented, like what do you need and how can employer help you? The more that we can be aware of what we're asking for to people, I think the more likely they'll be able to, be like, oh, okay, that can work, as long as we put forward what we're looking for. So if I were having issues working from home with my cognition, some of those same things around maybe writing things down in the meeting to make sure that there's a meeting of the minds afterwards. Any other ideas from other folks?
I was gonna say, something I want to say to that person is if you are working at home and you have something going on and you need an accommodation, you're a kind of employee that I want, because you're actually admitting that you have an issue and not trying to hide it. And if you're tired and you need a nap, you're not just disappearing and doing that. You're asking your employer to work with you. And I think that speaks volumes. Because many people could just keep that quiet. And if you're working from home, you can just go climb into bed, right? But if you're actually trying to do it the right way, as an HR professional, I find that amazing that somebody would actually disclose that and go that route when there are so many people who don't have a sleep disorder that would just go lay down and take a nap.
I love that. We are kind of running short on time. So I did want to move to one other topic, which we've discussed somewhat, but about, finding work possibly that helps with your specific energy levels. And, I know at one job I had, we had a variety of tasks. Some of it was like data entry, and some of it was very like writing these grant proposals, which took a different part of my brain. And I actually found that combination really helpful to go between those two things. And I was curious for other people. And I guess I didn't really know that going into that job, that I was going to have, how much I was going to enjoy some of the different tasks I was going to have in that job. But obviously, depending on where you are in your career, the option of choosing a job isn't always possible, but if you can start to think about what roles you're going to succeed in, and what drives you. Like, I know some people, like, it sounds like Trey, I imagine you're a little bit more extroverted than me, because dealing with kids all day, it sounds like it would take all my spoons for an entire week. So, but you know, what have you guys found anything about, like, how to deal with your energy levels and what kind of roles or duties you take on?
So kind of, I guess, two parts to me. Not only did I look at, the role itself, but also the company. Like I said, I had, been out of work trying to get myself situated prior to going back. So when I did start looking at new opportunities, I looked at for companies that were more flexible, ones that didn't have, this very rigid culture. I was not going to be one I knew going in that, would do well in that environment. So also looking at the environment with the company itself. And I actually went through and made lists of, what I was good at and what gave me energy. So looking at roles, where I was able to do that. For me, one of the big things was not having, the very same thing every day, having that variety, having different tasks. That was something that really helped me to stay awake and cognizant, and to have that energy to do the best that I could.
I'd say, yeah, I don't know if I have any more to say as far as the type of work I do. I feel like I never grew up. I got out of high school and learned just how much I wanted to be a part of a community and kind of give back to the kids around me. I had a lot of dope adults. I had people in my life who helped get me food, who helped wash my clothes. Like, it was really cool. And I was like, okay, cool, I'm gonna give back in that way. And then learning just throughout life, right? Just, oh, this job is probably not the best for me. Sitting at a desk is probably not the best for me. I am a tad bit more extroverted. So yes, seeing all those kids, it gives me energy. They give it to me, I give it back to them, vice versa, just giving them that energy as well. And I love the fact that you asked that question, because I feel like I just kind of manifested that as far as like what I'm currently doing right now. I feel like I'm in a really dope spot. And to get to spread awareness, but also like when they have art class, like I'm drawing with them. When they're in gym class, I'm drawing with them. I'm jogging, I'm throwing the balls, I'm out at recess having fun. A lot of my other coworkers as well, like one of the biggest things they like about the job is not only being able to help, but kind of hear their inner child. Like, so working at a school is definitely a blessing for me, because I get to teach like little Trey, like, okay, this is how you should probably deal with these things, as well as because I'm teaching another kid how to do it, a kid who hasn't even experienced it. And although I'm 25, I know based upon whatever I experienced when I was younger, I am healing the little kid in me and also helping them and being that figure in the lives. There's not a lot of Black males in the education system. So I am fortunate that I can be that and be that face and be with these kids, and they see themselves in me and can ask me questions and relate to me. So just gushing over here.
Nicole, anything in your job as far as, managing your energy levels, or?
For me, it's just as simple as, like, there's just times I have to switch tasks. If I'm in front of the computer for way too long, sometimes I'll just get up, and even though it's not part of my direct responsibilities, I just go to the file room and just file something. I mean, I'm standing up, I'm doing something, it just moving around, just changing the pace of the day. Because I can't sit in front of a computer for, 8 to 10, 12 hours and not fall asleep. So I just have to get up and move, do something different.
Yeah, even working for Project Sleep, some of the tasks like mailing packages is easier for me to do when I'm tired. However, I do worry sometimes, like, did I put the card in the thank you, package for someone, or did I put the right things in the package? A little bit, but it's still like a manual task that's easier for me to do when I'm tired. So yeah, I think that's really important to think about our energy levels. And this has just been such a special conversation. I just am so thankful for you guys and for everyone that's tuned in. I think we are over time, so I'm going to try to pull up the end slides here and just go through sort of like some of what we had to close out the discussion. Yeah, as far as disclosure, we just wanted to remind people, when you're preparing to disclose, you be prepared to disclose your diagnosis and the specific examples of reasonable accommodations that you're looking for. Hopefully our toolkit will be full of so many options that it'll be like, easy to choose and find what will work for you. And also a doctor's letter that should reinforce more about the condition and hopefully go along with what you're saying you need for accommodation. And yeah, hopefully we talked today about setting expectations. This definitely is a process. I did forget to mention this idea of making it more transactional. I've talked about this on prior broadcasts, that there are people in our lives we want to understand on an emotional level and really get it, and like come up to you and be like, oh my God, I get it now. And narcolepsy is so serious and you're so amazing for overcoming adversity. My feeling, having worked with a few different employers, was, as far as my HR relationships, is trying to think of it as more transactional. Like, here is what I need to get, and not always think that I'm going to get some sort of a huge emotional response, but what I need to get, my goal out of that, is the accommodation. So I think that can be helpful for our own sanity sometimes, to think of some relationships, such as within HR, as more transactional. And then you hope you have a supervisor that ends up in their high heels pulling the bench from the wrong room and putting it back in your nap room. But then just for resources, Social Security Administration, we did not talk today about, any sort of disability as far as, Social Security disability, and it's such an important area. I know the Hypersomnia Foundation has some really incredible resources as far as that goes. State disability law centers can be really helpful, your human resource department, and I know Lindsey and Nicole both mentioned the Job Accommodation Network. So hopefully we can put together this toolkit, which will be another great resource. Always important to mention the different organizations. They all have great resources: Hypersomnia Foundation, Narcolepsy Network, Project Sleep, and Wake Up Narcolepsy. And there are incredible organizations around the world as well. We have, I think, 31 different organizations mentioned now on our World Narcolepsy Day page that are co-leading World Narcolepsy Day, which is a great transition to remind everyone that World Narcolepsy Day is just about 3 weeks away tomorrow. And so we hope you're excited. I hope you're ordering your t-shirts. Today is the last day to order them in the US to ensure that they will arrive in time for September 22nd. So please be sure to get your t-shirt order in today. They are soft and cozy. If you have not yet had a Project Sleep t-shirt, they are pretty nice. We also will have a virtual photo booth that launches tomorrow. So this is your sneak peek preview here of Trey and Lauren and her family participating in our new retro 80s super fun photo and video booth. So we're excited to both see your photos, but also see some videos of you guys introducing yourselves from around the world, saying Happy World Narcolepsy Day in different languages. It's going to be so cool. So please check that out. It'll launch tomorrow. You'll get an email, don't worry. And we'll have some different online events throughout the month of September. And if you'd like to get more involved, we have an ambassador program where we have people that step up and say they want to do more for awareness. So we give them a toolkit, and they also do some fundraising if they'd like to fundraise for Project Sleep. So just some of the cool opportunities. We're really excited for September. And yeah, we'll have a toolkit coming soon. And our next broadcast is going to be in October. We're going to focus on sleep paralysis and the hallucinations of narcolepsy, possibly, sharing more about different people's experiences and what the heck do we do about these things. So really excited for that. I want to say a huge thanks to our panel today, and just can't wait to make a toolkit and eventually a podcast from this discussion. You guys are incredible, and we know it takes a lot of spoons to be with us today. So thank you for doing this. And I think with that, we'll go ahead and say goodbye for now. All right. Thank you guys. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. Thank you, Nicole, Lindsey, and Trey. Thank you, Lauren. Have a good rest of the day. Bye.